32 feet long. My son, the other Brock, and I are 2 of 31 people on board. There's a standing crew of 22, and the rest of us are either scientists or educators. We have an artist/cartoonist on board, believe it or not. It's an incredibly diverse group that's gotten along really, really well. And as we've done our research, gotten to know each other better, and the incredible amount of technology on board, which we're going to share a lot more with you this morning. Needless to say, when you've got this many people on board, there's some infrastructure that needs to be there. We need to go. You know, I said earlier, we're a long way away from anywhere. If we go to the next slide, it'll begin to give you some perspective of where we are. Okay, can you go to the map, the other map, please? It's coming. There we go. Every time I look at this map, and this is a map, not a chart, it kind of blows me away that if you look in the upper right-hand corner, here's the United States up here in North America, and the relative size of that versus the Pacific Ocean. We think of the United States as a pretty big place. Well, look at this. And when we started this expedition, we started over here in Guam, and we've transited, and you'll see in a second, we've transited east and a little bit north towards Hawaii. We're in an area now called Johnston Atoll, where we're doing the serious science. And the last half of the class today, we'll have you across the hall in the science lab with the scientists looking at what they're looking at live time to show you exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. Okay. To give you an idea, from here in Guam, as the crow flies over to Oahu, is about 3,300 miles. That's a pretty long way away. And as we transit, especially when we first left Guam, the weather was such that the captain made the decision that we would dive south a little bit. We were at 13 degrees north latitude when we started, and we went down to 9 degrees, so about 250 miles south, in order to avoid some winds and some sea state and make the trip a little more comfortable. And then we've been transiting for the last almost 2 weeks across to the Johnston Atoll area, where we're actually doing the science. And when I say doing the science, what we're doing is mapping the bottom of the sea. And where we are, there are undersea mountains. And what is the fact that this is a part of the world that nobody's ever looked at in terms of the seabed before. This is breaking or cutting edge technology that's allowing us to see what the bottom of the ocean looks like. And it's not like, the ocean here is very shallow. When we first left Guam and crossed what's called the Mariana Trench, anybody ever heard of that before, the Mariana Trench? Yeah. Go. When I ask you a question, just go ahead and yell it out. This is the trench over in here. And what about the Mariana? What do we know about the Mariana Trench? Yeah, excellent. How deep do you think it gets?
1,000 feet.
How about now somebody's talking right language. How about 11,000 meters, over 30,000 feet deep? You could take Mount Everest, turn it upside down, stick it in the Mariana Trench, and it wouldn't touch the bottom. I can assure you that's the deepest water I've ever been in, which was, it's the deepest part of the ocean, needless to say. So if we go to the next slide, which will be the tracing of the ship's course, which we saw up here once before. This gives you an idea of where the ship's going, and you'll see all this squiggly stuff going on here. This was our course coming across from Guam. And then what do you think started happening here? Say again? Mapping. You got it. We started... You can see these are seamounts, undersea mountains, and we've been mapping 1, 2, 3. We're now down here mapping 4 on these kinds of grids. And you will see when you get over to the science lab in a few minutes what that mapping looks like. I find it incredibly fascinating to what the contours are, and then the scientists take that data, interpret it, and I'll try to bring back with me a graphical representation of exactly what they're finding. I talked about infrastructure on the ship. Where do you think we get our water from, drinking water from on the ship?
Like tubes.
Like tubes, okay, that part of that's right. We have something on board. Actually, the nation of Saudi Arabia uses them to provide most of their fresh water. They're called desalination units, and what they do is they take in salt water from the sea, and they turn it into potable fresh water to be used on the vessel. It goes through, I think I counted them 4, after the desal unit, 4 purification filtering processes. So we have virtually unlimited fresh water on board. The desal unit makes about 5,500 gallons a day if we needed it to. And while we're talking about liquids, obviously when you take a ship this size and you have it go well over 3,000 miles, you got to have fuel. Now, how many gallons of fuel do you put in your truck or your car, or your parents do, if they have to fill up the tank?
12 gallons?
20.
Yeah, 12 gallons, 15 gallons, something like that. How many gallons do you think they put on board the ship when we were in Guam before we left?
20,000. 20,000.
How about 105,000 gallons of of diesel fuel? 105,000 gallons, which not only provides, obviously, fuel for the engines, but also provides balance or ballast for the ship to keep the ship leveled out. The reason we need so much is we burn almost 3,000 gallons a day, which is, to me, is pretty incredible. We are just going to another page of my computer. We try right now, while we're doing the mapping, we're going pretty slowly. We're going at about anywhere from 7.8 to 8.2 knots as we traverse the seamounts. When we were doing just transiting, and we were working and doing science during the transit, we were going about 10 knots, sometimes up to 11 knots. But obviously what controls that as much as anything is the amount of wind we're dealing with, and more importantly, the sea state and the direction that the seas are coming from. Those are decisions that are made by the captain, and obviously to keep the vessel and the crew safe and comfortable. Here's a shot of Ollie. Ollie's one of the second officers on board. And what do you think he's doing right here?
Steering the ship.
You got it. Do you see a wheel anywhere? No, not at all. He's basically playing a video game there. He's got a joystick, and then his right hand's on some throttles. And this was when we were coming off the dock in Guam. And it is amazing, between the bow thruster, which has over 500 horsepower in it, and the twin screws, the twin propellers that we've got, the ease with which Ollie was able to basically pull the ship sideways off of the wharf before we began to steam forward and out of the harbor. Ollie is one of 4 officers on the bridge deck. Obviously, the ship is overseen, its safety and its crew is overseen by on the bridge looking forward. And I'll tell you, it gives you a sense as to how small we really are in the full scale of things when you look out and you look at that horizon and all you see is sea and horizon. We traveled the first 7 days before we saw any other ship whatsoever. We were in a part of the world that was, needless to say, rather remote. We've seen 2 or 3 ships. We saw the other night a couple of what we assume were Chinese fishing vessels. But we are, again, in an area where there's not a whole lot of traffic. But you can see the consoles here in the bridge. They run the gamut from radar, which is this one here, to ship system, which is in the center. If we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see the console, which, well, here's another view just from stepping back into the navigation area. And here's the console. This was a picture taken at night. The only light that you see in there was the flash from the camera. Otherwise, as you go to the next slide, you'll see that, whoop, there's the console. But that's what the console looks like at night. It's kind of like the inside of an aircraft cockpit. Why do you suppose they use only red lights on the bridge at night?
It doesn't charge.
Yeah, because your eyes, exactly. If it was white light, it would restrict your night vision. Red light does not do that. Red light does not make your pupils constrict and therefore sacrifice vision. So this way you can be standing on the bridge, checking all the instruments and looking out through the windscreen to see if, in fact, there are any other vessels in the area. Yes, of course, you have the radar, which gives you an early alert, but the fact remains is under the international rules of the road, a vessel must maintain at all times a proper lookout. So physically, there needs to be one member of the crew who all the time is looking out. During the night watches, we have an officer on the bridge, and then we would have an AB, able-bodied seaman, who is on watch at the same time, who every hour takes a tour around the ship to make sure everything is secure, and then reports back to the bridge. If we go to the next slide, there's another nice shot. Here you are, and this is where you're about to go with the science crew. We have on board, in charge of the mapping that we're doing, we have 3 scientists, and Dr. John Miller from the University of Hawaii is our chief scientist. Joyce Miller, who is supposedly retired, but one of the real specialists and professionals in the world of multi-beam mapping, which you're going to hear a whole lot about, is on board and working in the lab. And right now, Jonathan Tree, we all call him Tree, who is a young scientist, again, from Hawaii. And Jonathan is, as he says, I do rocks. Jonathan studies the seabed, the composition of the seabed, and believe it or not, in these depths of water that we have, Jonathan is able to interpret the data and tell you, is that a soft seabed? Is it sand? Is it coral? Is it rock? And that's his area of specialty, and he's going to be talking to you and leading you through the lab. With him will be one of the Marines. Mike is, believe it or not, a guy from Durango, Colorado. How does he end up out here? Kind of interesting. I won't steal all your stuff, Brock, I promise. But they will be the 2 at the console with Brock, and you'll get a much better sense of what we're doing, how we're doing it. The ship, in terms of, you know, who else is on board besides the officers? As I mentioned, it takes 20 plus people to run the ship. You know, it's not like we pull into a dock every night. We are in the middle of the ocean, so this vessel operates 24 hours a day. One of the questions that always comes up is, well, how do you eat? I can assure you we eat really, really well. There are 2 chefs on board, Greg and Peter. They put out 3 meals a day for the entire complement on board, which is 30 plus people, 31. And the food is absolutely fantastic. Let me stop there for a second. Do you guys have any questions before we go on?
I do.
Fire away. Just talk loudly for me.
Okay, my question is, along the way to Hawaii, how does the crew find out that something is coming against the ship?
As in another vessel?
That made no sense. No, like, okay.
No, that made sense. I got.
Like, how do you know something's coming? Like
Well, we have radar, number 1.
Shark or whatever. Like a creature.
Okay, that's a great question. You know, one of the things that's been a little bit disappointing is we have not seen a single whale or a single porpoise at all, but we expect to as we get up closer to Hawaii. One of the things that the crew is very sensitive to, and one of the many reasons that you have to maintain a proper lookout at all times, is the last thing you want to do is have a ship strike on a sleeping whale or something like that. So there is always somebody looking forward in the vessel to make sure that doesn't occur. But again, in the deep ocean, we've not seen any life. I've seen a few birds, but that's about it. But good question. Is there another question? Okay, well, let me keep moving. The slide behind me gives you some sense of how we go about mapping the bottom of the sea. This is not Falkor here, but a similar vessel. And we are using what's called multi-beam sonar. Now, that's sort of the same technology that a fish finder on a fishing boat coming out of the vineyard has. The difference is that a fishing boat has one beam that goes down, not all of these different ones. We have the ability to send as many as 342 beams down, so we get a much more detailed picture of what the bottom looks like. And as the data comes back, well, let me stop there. The way the sonar works is we call it pinged or sent out of this gondola, this huge aperture that hangs from the bottom of the ship. It's quite flat, and the sonar signal goes down to the bottom, bounces off, and comes back up. And the time that it takes to do that is measured, and the software and the computers then interprets that time into distance. So we always know what depth of water we're in. And so it's using that data over what's called this swath that begins to create a picture or an image of the bottom. So with that said as an introduction, what I'm going to do is send you across the hall to the science lab, and Brock and Jonathan and Mike are going to be there to talk to you. So Brock, can you hear me?
I'm sitting here in the science control room, and I've got Jonathan Tree and Mike Coons. And Jonathan, what's your role on the ship?
I'm the watch leader for the night watch. So basically, I'm in charge of making sure that our surveys collecting good data, collecting good multi-beam data as well as magnetics data, and processing that data and producing a semi-finished product. So basically, I'll do what I can over the night and then pass that off to the lead scientist who comes in at 4 a.m. to take over our shift.
And how old are you?
I'm 28.
28 years old. And how long have you been doing this?
Oh, geez. 4 years?
4 years? Okay. And what did you study in college?
Geology, biology, and math.
And what did you like in high school? You played hockey, I know that much. What else did you do in high school?
Pretty much played hockey, and I took a lot of math classes.
Were you into geology in high school?
Didn't get a chance to take geology in high school. I did biology instead, though.
Okay. And Mike, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Mike is the resident DJ. We have a lot of good music going on at this hour because, as my dad said, it's 3 in the morning here. So when we're mapping and you guys are writing code and all sorts of little projects going on, we like to have a little music going.
Absolutely.
Where are you from, Mike?
I'm from Durango, Colorado.
Okay.
I grew up in Maine.
Cool. And we've got a question evidently. Go ahead, guys. What question do you have? Yep. So the question is, if something goes wrong at night, we have a hardware failure or one of the programs goes down, how do we fix that?
And if you pass over the area that got the failure, if you repeat the scan.
Yeah, once we get everything fixed, we would go back over and repeat. If it was really broken, we'd probably, come to a stop on the ship and just kind of hang out until we fix things. But